Going on the actual sessions. All right, so welcome everybody. Thanks again for coming to our Q2 Minneapolis LabVIEW user group. It's our first virtual user group, so hopefully this works out well. Definitely open to feedback on everything, so you can always respond with feedback or questions or ideas just by replying to the newsletter emails, and those will actually come back to me, and then I'll make sure that we all talk about them. All right, so a quick overview. If you're new to the user group, the team is put on by a variety of people, both from NI and from the community. So we've got Bruce Savare, Eric Schleifer, Steve Vetter, Tom Brass, and myself. We're the 5 main community members that help to make this happen. Obviously, normally I'd be pointing people out, but now you can see their pictures instead. From the NI perspective, we've got Jed, who is now focused on enterprise software, Tom Pollack, who's the district sales manager. If you know that he's your sales guy, then he's your sales guy. Otherwise, Nilson Rojas is the account manager that you want to be working with for anything NI related. And any questions about that, feel free to direct to Jed or Tom, and they can get you connected to the right people. All right, so just want to let everybody know, hopefully you learned about this through the mailing list already, but if not, definitely let me or anybody from the community leadership team know that you want to be added to the mailing list. This way you'll always be informed ahead of time when the user groups are going to happen and any additional updates. Okay, we had a few questions previous to the Q1 meeting that ended up getting canceled about recertification by points, and so I just wanted to show that once again. So this is a subset here, but if you participate in user group meetings, just by attending, you get 5 points. And you can see here, normally, right, we'll actually have NI Week, Alliance Day, other summits and education activities that can give you a lot of points both for attending and for presenting. So if you are certified, it is way easier to be recertified by points than it is by having to retake the exam. So definitely recommend tracking your attendance to all these different events, and then you can email NI certifications with your points and with a contact to verify, and then you'll be able to get recertified a lot easier. So just wanted to mention that again for those that were asking about it. Okay, so today we've got 2 VIPs.
Will, can I ask you a question? This is Eric Schaefer.
Yeah, what's up?
Usually we can record that we're at the meeting. There's a record.
Yes.
How do we record today?
So, yeah, so I believe, Daniel, actually, can you answer this question for me? I believe that when we actually have the recording of the meeting, it also keeps track of the attendance in the chat. Is that true?
So to be honest, I don't know if that's true or not. So probably the safest way is for someone to look at the, you know, if you go to show participants.
I'll take a snapshot of the.
Yeah.
So
okay.
I will go ahead and take a snapshot of all the attendees and make sure that gets saved.
Great, thanks, Jed. Good question, Eric. Thank you. All right. So we have Daniel Parrott here. He's a product marketing manager for LabVIEW and LabVIEW NXG. And then we also have Darren Nattinger. Darren, is it Darren Nattinger or Nattinger?
So you should only ever say it correctly, because if you say it incorrectly, people are going to remember the incorrect way. So the correct pronunciation of my last name is Nattinger with a hard G.
Great. So I got it right the first time. Awesome. All right. So Darren Nanninger, he's a former R&D member at NI. He's now principal technical support engineer. He's a CLA, and he's the 7-time winner for the world's fastest LabVIEW programmer. So between the two of these guys, we're going to learn a lot about what's new in NXG and LabVIEW. And I've asked them to kind of stay technical, focused on different, all sorts of different features, things that they like that I think that we'll find useful in our day-to-day developing world, as opposed to, you know, sort of like marketing slides and so on and so forth. So I think this will be a really good presentation for you guys. And so from here, I'm going to kick it off to Daniel. And if you want to start sharing your side, we'll be able to get started.
Yeah, thanks, Will. I just wanted to also give a shout out that we also have a few other NI folks that have joined the call. Rita Prather, a LabVIEW NXG product manager, and then I believe Matthew Friedman, who I work with on the product marketing team, is also on the call. So you might hear them pipe up occasionally and help answer questions too.
Great.
But thank you. Yeah, and I'm gonna have to warn you, I'm in marketing, so I do love slides. So I tried to cut out as many as I could, but I'm still gonna use them. But I wanted to kick things off just by, you know, showcasing the fact that NI has changed recently. I hope all of y'all were able to attend the events that happened a few days ago, but we have a major rebranding, and it's all about engineering ambitiously. So you saw the slide that Will was presenting, and you see our new logo here, but really what that means is that National Instruments is now just NI. So that's what that's our name, that's our company name, is just NI. This is our new logo. As you can see, our new colors are green. And you know, we did all of this because we wanted to rethink the way that we presented ourselves as NI, and we really wanted to make a focus on the customers. And so we want to challenge everyone to really focus on changing the way of thinking and engineer ambitiously. And so, you know, part of this effort is focusing on the great work that all of y'all do by, you know, tackling the next latest and greatest challenges and using your tools and strengths to really create the future. And so our main tagline is really engineering ambitiously, and you're going to see a lot more of that over the next months and years for sure. And our mission statement has changed slightly, but it's NI equips engineers and enterprises with systems that accelerate productivity, innovation, and discovery. And so a few differences that you'll notice here is that there is a focus on enterprises, and a lot of that is our system link focus and really enabling not just the small teams of an organization to be successful, but, you know, advancing that to the enterprise and organization as a whole. So that's a big focus of ours, as well as developing systems that help you accelerate productivity, innovation, and discovery. And, you know, all of this kind of combines with bringing together the right people. So being expert connectors. And I know a lot of y'all who have worked with NI over the years, hopefully y'all have seen this, but something that we really pride ourselves in is being able to connect. You know, you might call into support, but then they might bring in product management, or you might be talking to marketing. And really our goal is to be able to connect the right folks to provide the answers and the solutions that y'all need to be able to engineer ambitiously. And of course, we're focusing on this today, but also for the next 100 years. So focusing on the long term rather than just the short term. And this is really internal, but, you know, our values have changed slightly. And one of those first values that we changed is being bold. It's about taking risk. It's about, you know, striving for those ambitious engineering plans and future discoveries. And then being kind. And it's not just about NI being nice and a pleasant group of folks to talk to, but it's more about being candid, being upfront, making sure that we have, you know, your interest in heart when we're working with our customers. And like I mentioned before, being connectors, don't be a stopgap. You know, one of our core values is, as an employee of NI, we're trying not to be a stopgap to the problems that you're trying to solve. We want to connect and make it as easy as possible in order to make you successful. So really what you're going to see differently and how this affects y'all is, of course, you know, our logo has changed, our colors have changed. But if you've been to the website lately, we have made a few changes to the website as well. So you'll see these changes proliferate throughout. But this whole rebranding also comes along with a renewed focus on our website. And of course, it's going to take some time to refresh everything and rethink everything, but we really want to make the website as user-friendly as possible. And one of the first efforts that we've done is really rethinking some of the ways we display our products. So this pop out right here, you can easily get to the items that are the products that you're looking for. And that's really just one of the first steps in us reworking and renewing our website and making it as easy for you to find exactly what you need. So I just wanted to throw that out there just so you know that it's not just a rebranding. We're changing a lot of things to make sure that y'all are successful as possible. And of course, always engineer ambitiously. So now we're going to jump into and we can pause for questions too. If there are any questions, I'd love to hear, you know, anything that y'all have to say. So are there any questions about the branding? Take that as a no.
I know that all of you user group participants are wondering, when can you get your new swag from the box of swag that I hand out at user groups?
Yeah.
We have to meet in person in order for that to be possible. So, but I will work on trying to get a box of new NI swag as well for when we have more presentations happening.
So I have a question for you, Daniel.
Yeah.
It's not quite related to your presentation, but I noticed you're using a Mac.
Okay,
does that mean that LabVIEW is going to continue to be supported on the Mac going forward, or is that just a personal preference?
So it's mostly a personal preference. I thought I would make the switch. So it came time for me to pick a new work laptop, and I picked a Mac. But that we will still support Mac for the long term. It's just, it takes some time to get there. And of course we have to, you know, really look at our user base and focus our R&D efforts on which OS makes the most sense. So that is still Windows as of today. So a lot of our efforts are focused on Windows, but we are having a renewed effort on working on Linux support. And so that's coming out in the next, it'll be coming out over the next years or so, but we have a renewed effort to focus on Linux. Mac is still one of those things where of course we want to create products for Macs and whatnot, but it's just a smaller percentage of our user base. And so we're focusing our R&D efforts on the majority of our users, which is Windows, and ever, we're seeing more Linux adoption. And so that's why we're trying to improve our Linux support.
Okay.
But that is a great question.
This is Matthew Friedman. Just to be clear, so LabVIEW Current Gen, we are still committed to supporting it on Mac. We're all pretty interested to see what Apple debuts in the next week or so in terms of ARM, which may change some software compatibility, which we're all going to have to understand once that happens. NXG at this point is Windows only. And as Daniel mentioned, a lot of our focus is also further expanding Linux support quite greatly. You'll see that in terms of all additional driver support happening in the next couple months, as well as we'll continue to support more of LabVIEW and the different Linux distributions as well.
Do you only support enterprise Linux OSs? So I noticed Red Hat is one of the big ones that you guys try to strive for, and Ubuntu. But are there specific distros that are more advantageous to, say, use first if you're looking to use LabVIEW on Linux?
Those are the two that are probably most supported right now. We're also looking at Debian as well.
Okay.
Good question, though. I was waiting for someone to point that out, so I'm glad you got it. You got
Gotta get it out of the way.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, great. I will move on. And so how we're going to do this presentation is I will start with, showing what's new in LabVIEW NXG, because we just had the LabVIEW NXG 5.0 release. And then I'm going to go through a few features of LabVIEW 2020, and then Darren's going to jump in and do a live showcase of a lot of the other LabVIEW 2020 features, and some of LabVIEW features that you might not have noticed came up in 2019. So I will go ahead and get started. And of course, if you didn't know, we had a LabVIEW release back in May. So we introduced LabVIEW NXG 5.0 and LabVIEW 2020. We're really excited about these releases. They bring a lot of great new features. And this presentation is talking about both. And both LabVIEW NXG and LabVIEW are really, there's no other development software that boosts your productivity like LabVIEW. And I did want to reiterate that with one purchase of LabVIEW, you still get access to LabVIEW NXG. So if you have a LabVIEW Professional license, you get access to the LabVIEW NXG Professional Edition. And then, so just wanted to point that out. So if you already have access to LabVIEW, you have access to LabVIEW NXG. So diving into what's new in LabVIEW NXG 5.0, all of these features really, really boost up the main benefits of using LabVIEW NXG. So they all kind of tie back into these, which is, being able to develop systems faster with our more user-friendly system designer, and being able to cobble together hardware pieces and see that live in LabVIEW NXG, being able to rapidly customize your application, and of course, being able to create web applications with the LabVIEW NXG web module. So just a reminder that, these are the main benefits that you'd focus on when trying to choose LabVIEW NXG versus the other one, and all of these new features tie into these. Really, the first big news, which is really exciting for a lot of us, is that we now support Compact Rio with DACMX on LabVIEW NXG. We are extremely excited to have this support. And why this is exciting is because now you can take advantage of your Compact Rio and take advantage of the LabVIEW NXG features that I just talked about. So stuff like System Designer that streamlines your workflows, and being able to use Compact Rio in your LabVIEW NXG applications. Now we do have full support for C-Series modules while you're using the DACMX driver on the Compact Rio with DACMX. And we have an initial level of support for C-Series modules when you're targeting the FPGA. So you will notice that difference. And of course, this is, we just got started with this support. We're going to increase the support as time goes on. So we'll keep adding new modules and more support for modules on the FPGA side. And really, I wanted to show y'all a quick demonstration of that. So I am using a Windows VM to showcase LabVIEW NXG. And here's LabVIEW NXG. If you haven't used it before, really you have your palette and your programming right here, just like you would the front panel and the block diagram. And then you also have on the left-hand side, the project panel, which has your project, as well as your data, your captured data, and some debugging tools. Also, quick note, you can minimize these so you have more space. And then on the right-hand side, you have all of your settings and all your documentation. So in LabVIEW NXG, when you're developing with hardware, really you're going to organize all your hardware using the system designer. So I'm going to open this up, and we have our system designer. So there's two parts of the system designer, and you can think of the system designer as the palette where we can lay out all the hardware we're using, and then actually use all of the typical or set up all the typical tasks that you would in Macs in LabVIEW NXG. So we have a live tab, which shows all of the live hardware that I have connected to my system. This is just a VM, so you can see the Windows VM here, and then you can see I have a simulated DAC device. And if it's a live hardware, we see here that we have this green circle indicating that it's live and it's connected to my system. And then once I select on the live hardware on the left-hand side here, I have tons of options. And this is typically the stuff that you would have to do in NI Max, but we've brought it into the editor so you don't have to leave to go change some settings, to look up documentation, to see what drivers you have installed or what drivers you need to have installed. Also, you can open up a measurement panel here to create some quick measurements or test your hardware out. Even going to the calibration and seeing when the last calibrated date was. You've got your troubleshooting steps here, and then some advanced features that you would have to do in NI Max. So NI Max is still needed because you still need to do some things in NI Max, but the majority of stuff you would need to do hardware settings wise is right here for you to use. And then you have everything set up the way you want, and you can also share your hardware setup by sharing a system designer report or a hardware configuration file for others to use. And so here's the live tab, but let's say I want to start programming with some hardware that I don't have, which is often the case. You then go to your design tab. And this is where you can really start to lay out everything you want to work with. And I can also, well, we can start here with, let's just say I want to add everything that's live. So I can add these here, and I can see on the design tab that these are actual live because I have these green equal signs. But then I want to start working with C-Rio. So I will open up and add a compact Rio chassis. Let's say a 9045. And so I will add that here. You can see that this is not currently connected, so it's not here, not a live piece of hardware because it's not matched. But here's where I would set up my compact Rio. I can add specific modules. If I go to analog, I can add my voltage module. And then I would dictate which module is going to work on the real-time side or the FPGA side. So I'll keep that on the real-time side. Also, if you've worked with C-series modules before, one of the really exciting things is that now, if I want to, let's say I want to change the 9045 to a different chassis, I can now just go to the model and change that to something different. And so all of the settings should transfer over to the new chassis when that pops up to a 9043. Beforehand in LabVIEW, you had to copy and delete and move things around on the project. It was a really finicky process, and now we've simplified that just by changing the model here. You can also, just like I mentioned before, you've got all your access to documentation, then system management tools, and then if you need to do something advanced, you can go to the live tab and then go to NI Max. One thing to note is that to install software to the compact Rio, you still need to use NI Max. So, if you need to install a certain software stack, you would do that first in NI Max, and then you would open up the compact Rio and start working with it here. And then from here, I would start working on my actual program. So I would create an FPGA application that targets the FPGA. And then go from here, and then I would add a VI to that, and this is where I would build my application. So if I go here, add the VI, I would start working with this. The other thing that you can add is the resource collection, which is where you would make your FIFOs and whatnot. So it's a little different from LabVIEW program with compact Rio, but most of the same features in workflow. But I do know that most of y'all work in a test-related realm, so I just wanted to showcase compact Rio being available in LabVIEW NXG and what it looks like when you first get started. If you are interested in further features, we have some great getting started videos that you can look at that walk you through step-by-step how to make your first compact Rio application on LabVIEW NXG. So I will go back to my slides. And then really all of this is made possible by, not the demo, But the introduction of the LabVIEW NXG real-time module. This is really what makes us be able to work with Compact Rio with DACMX now. We introduced the LabVIEW NXG FPGA module about a year or so ago, and now we finally have the LabVIEW NXG real-time modules. It does, of course, supports Compact Rio with DACMX controllers, like I just showed y'all. It also supports PXI controllers with NI-Linux real-time. And it has the core functionality upon release. There are still some features that are missing, and we're going to improve upon those as we go. And also just a reminder that if you've purchased the LabVIEW NXG real-time module or the LabVIEW NXG or the LabVIEW FPGA module, you get access to the LabVIEW NXG version of those. So it's still the 2 versions with 1 price. The next feature that we're really excited about in LabVIEW NXG is the Python node. So we've had this in LabVIEW for a few years, but we finally have the native ability to call Python from LabVIEW NXG. We can. It currently supports Python 3.6. Of course, we'll add to that as we go. And this is the only version that's been tested, so it likely supports other versions, but we just can't guarantee it. And again, the Python node is native to LabVIEW NXG, so you don't have to install any extra toolkits or third-party toolkits to use. You can just open up the Python node and start using it in LabVIEW NXG, just like you can with LabVIEW. And this is just an example of calling the NumPy module right there. Of course, you can do matrix math in LabVIEW and LabVIEW NXG, but this is just a quick example to showcase us calling a Python script. And then really the other example that we're really excited about is the ability to create and write to Microsoft Word reports. So this also includes Excel reports. So we've had that ability for a little while, but now we can create and write to Word templates as well as Word reports. You can create Word documents and so forth. This is a feature that is somewhat similar to the report generation toolkit, but uses a different way of doing this under the hood. So it's a different method of technology. It's what Microsoft recommends from now on in the future. So this is a great starting point for working with Word reports and Excel reports. Also, the great thing about using this ODF technology is that you do not have to have Word or Excel installed on the computer. When you're running, if you're deploying a piece of code and it's running on the computer, you don't have to actually install the Microsoft Office toolkits on there, which a lot of people love because they don't want to have to install something on a deployment PC. And then we also have the LabVIEW NXG web module. We add new features to it every release. There are a few extra features that we added this release, which is stuff like when you're developing, we actually use the NI web server, which I'll also talk about in a little bit. You can create custom UI elements. There are new classes and properties that we support, and we have improved node support. And I'll show this a little bit later also in a demo working with LabVIEW, but you can use the web module and create web VIs that work with your existing LabVIEW applications. So this is a great example of using both LabVIEW NXG and LabVIEW in the same application together. And when you combine that with the System Link API, which simplifies data transfer mechanisms, it's the fastest way to get a web application up and running, especially using your LabVIEW skills, because you're coding in the same LabVIEW G language you're used to, but then you're creating a really powerful, flexible web application that can run completely in the browser without extra downloads or installs. And there are tons of other features in LabVIEW NXG that we added. I won't go through all these today, but we're really excited about the latest release of LabVIEW NXG 5.0, and of course, we're looking forward to the future. And one of the bigger questions that we get is, well, what's next for hardware support in LabVIEW NXG? I hope most of y'all know that we already support a vast majority of our hardware in LabVIEW NXG. And really what we're focusing on next is a few things. First off, we're completing the C-Series module support on the FPGA, like I mentioned earlier. We're adding R-Series hardware support, we're adding RF hardware support, and then we'll continue to add third-party driver support. So third-party drivers and toolkits that you can use with just like in LabVIEW NXG. We support over 600 of those right now, and so we'll continue to fill that out so you can work with third-party hardware in LabVIEW NXG just like you would with LabVIEW. And of course, this isn't a complete list, but these are our major focuses going forward as we continue to fill out support in LabVIEW NXG. Okay, well, this is where we're going to jump into the LabVIEW 2020 stuff. I did want to stop and offer, does anyone have any questions on the new LabVIEW NXG features? Or LabVIEW NXG in general?
Daniel, there's one question about plugin based application features in this release for NXG. So what kind of like class support and plugin implementation support that's provided by NXG at this point?
Yeah, so as of the 4.0 release, we did introduce Actor Framework. So it does support classes and object-oriented programming. And now Actor Framework is in LabVIEW NXG. And then at least in plugin support, I'm not extremely familiar with that, but we did improve the ability to create plugins, especially for, if partners want to create plugins and work in LabVIEW NXG, we did improve that experience.
How about interfaces? Steve Mercer showed interfaces working in LabVIEW at the last CLA summit.
Yeah.
Have they made it to NXG?
They have not. So they just made it to LabVIEW 2020, which is what I'll be talking about. So they are not in LabVIEW NXG just yet. And to be honest, I don't have a timeline for that because things continually change. But that will probably be one of the other things that we consider when we're talking about object-oriented programming in LabVIEW NXG as well. Joshua Pratt, are you trying to talk? I think you're muted. You're still muted.
How about now?
Okay, yeah, we can hear you now. Okay.
Okay, so in the previous slide, you showed you can dynamically load images into LabVIEW NXG. Does that include, say, transparent PNGs? Will the transparency still be there? Or because that was one of the limitations with LabVIEW is that it would load the image, but it wouldn't stay transparent.
Ooh, that is a great question, which I do not know the answer to. But I'm hoping Rita Prather can jump in. She's on the call.
Hey, yeah, unfortunately, I don't know the answer to this one either. I can ask, though.
Okay. Yeah, Joshua, we can get back to you with that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think Thomas Smith, we've got a question.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Right. I apologize. I should have asked this question at the beginning. I only speak for myself, but I've got to say that the face-to-face meetings of this group are far more rewarding. So my question is, do you anticipate going back to face-to-face meetings with this group later this year?
Yeah, I think it's a challenging question to answer. It really is just going to come down to what level of guidance there is from the Department of Health in Minnesota as well as the CDC. I believe right now our limit is gatherings of 10 people, and somebody can correct me, they might have updated that recently to 25 or something like that. But in any case, it hasn't reached the size of our user groups yet. And so we'll also have to take into consideration how all the other members feel about it. I completely agree with you that in-person meetings are definitely a lot better. There's a lot more opportunity for conversation and to swap ideas and to just get to know each other. So we want to move back to that as soon as we can, but it's really going to depend on how quickly we have a handle on the pandemic.
Thank you.
Yep, I would just second that. I think that definitely the desire is to get back to in-person meetings. And I think we all very much enjoy those. This is just kind of the next best option we can come up with. While we're while things are the way they are. So.
Completely agree. I saw some hands up. Did that in the groups? Is that did all the questions get answered? Anything else before we move on? Okay.
Good.
I will move on. Okay, so that were the new features in LabVIEW NXG 5.0, and then we'll jump into LabVIEW 2020. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this, I'll cover a few things, and then Darren's going to jump in and show us the rest of what's new in LabVIEW 2020. So again, I mean, all of these features tie back into the main benefits of using LabVIEW, which y'all are all probably extremely familiar with, like unparalleled hardware support, being able to visualize and understand your data with inline processing, and just being able to rapidly iterate with the graphical programming language and really engineer ambitiously, right? So keeping that in mind, the first feature that we'll be talking about is interfaces in LabVIEW 2020. So this is a brand new to LabVIEW 2020. And really, if you, an interface is similar to a class, if you're familiar with classes, but it does not have private data control, and you can't call the parent class method node. So what this really means is that it allows your code to be much more flexible. And what I mean by that, if you look at the chart on the right, you see here we have a chart of classes. So I've got parent classes and child classes. Now, these are all tools. So all these tools are supposed to do something. And for example, I've got my prying tool class, which has the pry method. Now, as classes are, the child classes can inherit the pry method. So the crowbar and the bottle opener, of course, you can pry stuff open with those. That works awesome. But, sometimes there's some occasions where I might want to use a tool for something else, like I want to pry something open with a screwdriver, which isn't recommended, but, sometimes you need to do what you need to do. So if I wanted to pry with this screwdriver class, I couldn't do that because the parent class of screwdriver does not have the pry method. And so I would be prohibiting from using the pry method with the screwdriver. And to make up for this, typically people have to create a parent class that includes all sorts of different methods, and the class becomes really bloated. And so that's just not a good design practice. So what we've done is finally introduced interfaces, which allow you to enable a form of multiple inheritance. So what this looks like is once I introduce my interface, and you can't do that. So once you introduce your interface class, or just your interface, like the lever interface, now I can assign the pry method to that lever interface. Now what this means is that I can then share my method with other classes. So now, the prying tool, of course, can inherit the pry method. The crowbars and the bottle openers can, of course, inherit the pry method. But now the screwdriver can also inherit the pry method, as well as anything else I would add, like a house key can inherit this pry method. So, interfaces really make your code more flexible because now you can use those methods where you need to and not have to create a really bloated parent class. And this really shines when you're developing tools like hardware abstraction layers or HAL-MALs and other software architectures. And just to, I always love showing stuff in different ways, and that's how I learn. But I've got a quick demo, and I don't know if y'all remember this, but this is one of my favorite kitchen tools. It is the Veg-O-Matic. So this is a tool that does not everything, but it slices, it dices, it wedges, it does all sorts of different stuff. So really the question is like, well, if we were creating a class architecture with the Veg-O-Matic, how would we do that, and what would that look like? So we have a quick demo here that's showing a Veg-O-Matic class hierarchy. And so we have what you see here is slicer, dicer, fry, and each one of these have methods. The slicer method, of course, the knife can use the slice method. But the question is, well, okay, I have my Veg-O-Matic, which does multiple things. How does this work? And if you see on my project on the left-hand side, the dicer, slicer, and fry maker are actually interfaces. And so you can tell this is an interface by the white-edged cube. So if I open up my quick demo, I'll show y'all how my Vegematic can also slice when the knife is really just the child class. So I'm going to use a knife, and I want to slice some vegetables. So if I open up my block diagram, you can see here I have my two classes. I've got the knife and I got the Vegematic, and both of these will be slicing the vegetable. So if I select to use the knife and I run in highlight execution, we can see, of course, my knife can use the slice method, no problem. But now with the power of interfaces, I can use the slice method with the Vegematic as well. So the Vegematic can slice the vegetable, and we can use this tool that's meant for multiple purposes by using interfaces with our classes. I know that was a pretty simple example, but I think it demonstrates pretty well, the capabilities of interfaces and what you should look for when you're, at the very least in the project when you're looking for interfaces and trying to tell the difference between the two. The next feature that I'll talk about in LabVIEW 2020 is some application builder enhancements. You now have the ability to configure a custom action when NI Package Manager repairs a package. This is really useful for if you've got a really complicated install. You can now set it up to, hey, I want to change some config files if the repair fails and I need to redo some things, or some other items. So now you can do a custom action before or after the NI Package Manager makes the repair. And the next feature for Application Builder is just some new options when you're configuring package feeds, stuff like including all dependencies in the feed, including all dependencies in the feed, appending package versions to the feed location, and then when you're publishing to the system link feed, you can now include all dependencies to that system link feed. So really valuable stuff, especially if you already use packages and feeds that are now added to Application Builder in LabVIEW 2020. And then we get to really being able to simplify web application development when we're using web services in LabVIEW. Because now you can deploy your LabVIEW web services to the NI web server. And the reason you do that is the NI web server is a production grade web server that handles a lot of the security things you'd have to worry about, and also let you scale your application by advancing to stuff like system link and hosting those services on the same server. Of course, the application web server continues to be supported. I think this is an exciting feature, but I think it really makes a difference when I show y'all what it actually means in the bigger context of things. So I've got my trusty application here. My favorite web service example, of course, is the weather monitor. So I hope you all have all played around with this. This is an example that's included in LabVIEW, and it's really good about showing the basics of using and building a web service on or with LabVIEW. So I've got my client application here and server application. If I open up the server, I can see it's a weather simulator. So it's just producing weather data in JSON format and a couple other different formats. And then the web service is sitting there and will either distribute data or take in data once something requests something from the web service. So typically you would, this is already a pre-built package, but if I go to the weather simulator server that's already built and I go to properties, I can see
it's thinking.
It's thinking, yeah. I can see here that when I go to my web services tab, I now have the option to deploy to an NI web server. And to be honest, if you want to use the web server, it's easy as that. You select the NI web server option in your web services application, and then you build it and you're good to go. Of course, you can still use the application web server if you need to. And one thing to note is that if you are hosting your web service on a CRIO, an RT target, you will still need to use the application web server. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to build this and host it on the NI web server. So if I build this real quick, you can see that going on. Something you'll have to do regardless is, set up your NI web server. So I just want to show real quick what this looks like. And there are lots of options here, lots of things that it's hosting and services that you can use. But really, what you'll do is run this guided setup. And you can see here all of the configurations that you can use. And this is what I mean by the NI web server handles a lot of the security precautions that you would need to do custom if you're using the application web server. I'm going to keep it simple local access because I'm just playing around on my VM. And then, of course, make a password. And then it's ready to go. I'm setting up for a really simple use case, but it's ready. I can finish that. So the NI web server is now configured for me to use it and mess around with it. And then once that's restarted, let me open up and show that it actually worked. There we go. Okay, so if I launch my application, so the executable launches the web service, but also launches the VI that I use to see the simulated data. So once this actually executes and opens up, I will see the weather simulator VI pop up. I think it's shy because I'm presenting. That's why. And then make sure that. And so I've got my weather simulator. It's producing data. It's running on the NI web server. And then if I open up my client application, which is also included in the example project, I can show y'all that it is indeed working. So if I start that, great, I've got my graphs, which updates with the weather simulator. So I'm reading from the web service and gathering all that information. And then if I change this to the JSON format or the raw values, I can also see that update as we go, which is awesome. But I mentioned the web module before, so something else that I did was create a simple web client using LabVIEW NXG. So here I've got a really simple weather monitor. It's very similar to what I did with that's included in the example. I'm taking in the latest values, I chart those to a graph, and then I also just plot all the raw weather JSON outputs here. And I've got some connection troubleshooting stuff if I need it. And this is pretty simple on the diagram. I'm simply doing a GET call, if you're familiar with HTTP. And so all it is, I do the GET call to the web service, and then I'm getting all of this data back and presenting it. So, and the great thing about the web VI is that I can also host that on the NI web server. So if I'm going to run this in browser so you can see it running live. This isn't how you would host it permanently, but this is a really easy way to check that your web VI is running correctly when you're troubleshooting things or developing it. And once this opens up, we can see it live and in action. And so again, web VIs run completely in the browser. You don't have to install the LabVIEW runtime engine or anything like that. Also, web VIs have the ability to you can use something called flexible interface. And so this allows you to create a web VI that can adapt to different screen sizes. So I have my weather monitor here. And once it's, so I can see it's working just fine. But, if I wanted to pull this up on a phone, you can now make your web VI adapt to whatever screen size you're using. so that they can read it. So really, you can create something that's readable and usable by a lot of different folks if you need to use a tablet, a big screen TV, or a phone. So yeah, there's my WebVI. I'm using the client, and it's all hosted on the NI web server, and I'm getting all the simulated weather values. Okay, so that was just 3 of the many features in LabVIEW 2020. There are a ton more, and this is where I hand it over to Darren to give us a view of all these different features and demonstrate them in action.
All right, thanks, Daniel. Everybody should be seeing my screen now, and hopefully I'm unmuted so everybody can hear me. Okay, so I think Daniel had enough slides for the both of us, so my presentation is purely on a LabVIEW block diagram. I'm going to be demonstrating a lot of new features in 2020. So Daniel showed you guys some of the big features like interfaces, the app builder enhancements. The features I'm going to be talking about are mainly improvements to the editor. So how we can improve your use of the LabVIEW editor on a day-to-day basis. Now, a lot of the features that you're going to see, almost all of them, were originally suggested on the LabVIEW Idea Exchange. So if you have ideas on how to improve LabVIEW, please post them to the Idea Exchange. The LabVIEW R&D team regularly harvests ideas from there to include them in the product. In fact, many members of LabVIEW R&D contributed the features that I'm going to show today, not only myself, but some of the other people that have been there a long time, like Rob and Steve, Steven and Craig and Greg. And there's even a couple of Jeff K specials in these demos that I'm going to show. And I'll mention when that's the case, because people always seem to like to hear when it was actually Jeff K that implemented a feature in LabVIEW. Almost all of the features shown in my demo, every single one of them except for one, is already described in the LabVIEW 2020 upgrade notes. So ni.com/r/upnote20. I highly recommend that whenever you upgrade to a new LabVIEW version, maybe while the installer is running, you go read the upgrade notes on ni.com, because that's the easiest way to find out about all the great new features in the product. And another way that you can find out is to just send me an email. So if you have any questions about any of the features I'm showing right now, or anything else having to do with LabVIEW 2020, feel free to send me an email. So I'm going to start showing some of these features. They're in no particular order. Some of them are way cooler than others. But first off, we're going to start with a relatively simple one, which is a new right-click option in LabVIEW. So if you have a variant controller indicator on the front panel, you can now right-click and do data operations, clear data. So that's a pretty nifty little feature if you work with variants, but it also gives me an opportunity to point out that feature was written with LabVIEW. So I'm pretty sure I'm the one that wrote that one, and I don't do C programming. I'm a LabVIEW programmer. And there is a way to write your own right-click plugins for the LabVIEW editor. So when you right-click on things, you can actually have LabVIEW code provide entries in the right-click menus. If you didn't know about that feature, it's been there since LabVIEW 2015. We've implemented probably 24 features in LabVIEW since then as right-click plugins. You can learn more about those by going to ni.com/lvmenus. You can learn how to write them. You can download community plugins, and you can kind of see sort of how the feature has evolved over the past few years. It's one of the easiest ways as a LabVIEW programmer for you to enhance the LabVIEW editor. It got to the point where my colleagues in LabVIEW R&D would be discussing a new feature, and they would say, wow, that would be way easier to implement as a right-click plugin than as C code. So let's get Darren to do that one. And that's how a lot of the right-click menu entries in LabVIEW in the past 5 years have been added. So I just wanted to mention that in case you didn't know about it already. Check out ni.com/lvmenus. A few of the other features I'm going to demo in this presentation are also implemented as right-click plugins, and I'll try to remember to mention that when that is one of those features. All right, so another feature we have is a new VI in the numeric conversion subpalette called enum to array of enums. I find that I've had to write code before where I actually need an array that gives me all the values in an enum, and now we have a VI that will give you that. So you can see I've got this enum with the days of the week, and on the front panel we can see here that running it through this VI, we end up getting those values as an array. So it's pretty handy to have that. Next up, how many times have you needed to create a GUID? Maybe you haven't, but maybe somebody you know does. There's .NET calls to do it. There's DLL calls to do it. I have actually seen people write pure LabVIEW code using the string primitives to do it. And now we've just got a VI that we ship with LabVIEW that you can use. So if you need a GUID, just drop create NI GUID and you'll get a GUID formatted like this for any time you might need one. Okay, so this right here is I believe the only feature in my presentation that is not in the upgrade notes. And the reason is because it's kind of a hidden feature. So if you're like me, you hate that whenever you drop an error cluster on a front panel, it's got a label of error in parentheses, no error. That parenthetical statement right there is completely worthless. It takes up space on my front panel on my block diagram, and I wish it wasn't there. Unfortunately, the idea on the ID Exchange to remove that was rejected. So I ended up having to add a hidden feature to LabVIEW to help those of us that really want to get rid of that. So if your INI file has ni.lv.remove_no_error equals true, then whenever you create an error control, it has the proper label. It does not have the no error on it. This feature also works for create sub-VI. So for example, if you want to use create sub-VI and you want to look at the front panel of your sub-VI, you will see that we also create it with the no error parentheses. So if you want the built-in LabVIEW features to no longer create error controls with error in parentheses, no error, add that INI token. And don't hold your breath about that ever becoming an official feature. All right, so moving on. Does anybody have any questions so far on any of the features I've showed? Somehow when I started sharing my screen, I lost the Teams chat view. So somebody will need to tell me if there's any questions so far. Sounds like we're good, so I'm going to continue. All right, so this is actually a feature that I personally requested on the ID Exchange. So I was very happy that my colleagues implemented it. When you're working with path data types in LabVIEW, it is my opinion that you should stick with path data types as much as possible. And what always really bothered me was when people would use the build path function, when they would create a constant or control after the second input, it would always be a string. And then I would see people type stuff like this, where that's a string constant that has a path value in it. That is bad. You should not do that for multiple reasons, one of which is if this code ever moves over to a different platform, it's guaranteed to break. So one of the ways I figured we could solve that would be to make the second input of the build path function default to being a path instead of default to being a string. So in LabVIEW 2020, when you drop build path, its bottom input by default is a path. You can still wire a string to it if you need to, but now I'm hoping we'll encourage people to stick more with a path data type when they're working with paths by making this small little change. All right, this one was done by Jeff K. A lot of people find it hard to remember how to configure the array to cluster function. You actually have to right-click on it and do cluster size to change the cluster size. Jeff K figured it would be easier if you could just double-click on it. So double-click on the function does the same thing. Nice little enhancement to the editor that Jeff added. All right, this is a feature request that has been around for a long time. I am the author of Quick Drop. I added it to LabVIEW 8.6. It's been making LabVIEW programmers faster ever since. But one of the feature requests that I've had for a really long time is that people want to be able to see the context help window update as you browse things in Quick Drop. And we finally got around to adding that in LabVIEW 2020. So if I have a list of things in Quick Drop, if you watch the context help window on my screen, you'll notice that it changes depending on what's selected in Quick Drop. So sorry that took me so long, but we finally got around to adding it in LabVIEW 2020. All right, speaking of Quick Drop, in case you didn't know, you can insert objects on wires with Quick Drop. It's much faster than using the palettes. If you wanted to insert something on this wire with the palette, you would right-click, you would go to Insert, you would go to Palettes, and I've already fallen asleep because it's taken me so long to try to find something in the palette. So instead, why don't I use Quick Drop? So if I select both of these wires, I can do Control Space, type the thing that I want to insert on both wires, and press Control I. Now, until LabVIEW 2020, unfortunately, that insert would actually go on the bottom input of the function, which people did not like, and I agree, I did not like it either. So I made Quick Drop Insert a lot smarter in LabVIEW 2020. Not only for functions like that, but for a whole lot of other functions that when you inserted them, didn't quite do the right thing. As an example, let me bring up LabVIEW 2019 here. Notice how I have a blue 2019 and a green 2020. That's how I remember, old stuff is blue and new stuff is green as of Tuesday anyway. So if I have this wire right here and I do insert into map, that is not the insert I wanted. It kept the map wire on the input, but for some reason it wired this Boolean input on the output. That is probably not what you wanted. You probably wanted the map wire to be passed through. So in 2020, if you do the same exact thing, and that works correctly. So there's dozens of insert improvements that I made like that in LabVIEW 2020 if you're using quick drop insert. If you are not using quick drop insert, you are slow because you are using palette insert. So start teaching yourself how to use quick drop insert instead. Control space, type the thing you want, Control I. Okay, this is probably my favorite feature in LabVIEW 2020, and I am not kidding. I don't particularly like using the icon editor. It provides a ton of functionality, but it's a little bit slow. Sometimes it takes a little while to launch. It takes me a little while to navigate through the different pages of it. And the vast majority of the time, I would say 90% of the VI icons that I'm editing are text-based icons. If you write modular LabVIEW code, that means you write a lot of sub-VIs. And if you're writing a sub-VI that nobody's going to see except for the developer of your code, there's no reason you need to go crazy with graphical icons. In my opinion, and some people don't share this opinion, but in my opinion, an internal sub-VI that no one but developers sees, it's perfectly fine for that to have a text-based icon. In my opinion, it's actually easier to read the code with a text-based icon for an internal sub-VI. Now, if you're making a palette of things, yes, please give your VIs nice, graphical, intuitive icons. But for underlying internal code, text-based icons are fine. And since that's most of the sub-VIs I'm writing, most of my sub-VIs have text-based icons. And it's kind of a pain to go into the icon editor and type that text all the time. I know I'm really drawing this out here to show you all this feature, so I'll go ahead and show it now. You can right-click on a VI icon and choose Set Icon's VI Name. Notice I did not have to go into the icon editor. We figured out based on the file name, we gave you a decent icon for your VI. Now, let's say you want to give your VI icon a text-based icon, but you don't want it to be the file name. You may have like an abbreviation that you want to use instead. In that case, what you can do is you can press Control Space to bring up Quick Drop, and I'll type in something like demo text icon, and I'm going to press Control K. And when you do that, you can specify the text that you want to be on the VI icon. I think this feature is going to be one of the biggest time savers for me in LabVIEW 2020, just because it allows me to skip using the icon editor so much. So along those lines, we have another icon editing feature, which is for libraries. So I'm going to bring up a library here, and I'm going to go to its properties page. Now, this is the default icon banner. And I don't know about y'all, but it really bothers me that that icon banner is 2 pixels higher than it needs to be. That actually ends up squishing some of my icon text for a lot of my library members. So we've addressed that issue in LabVIEW 2020. You can see there's a new button here that says Set Text Icon. If I click that, I get kind of like a mini icon editor. Like, this is not the giant, humongous icon editor. This is a place that lets me type in some text, change the color if I want, but most importantly to me, it shrinks the banner of the icon down to the size that it should be, which is 2 pixels smaller than the default. So now it's very easy to edit those library icons and class icons and interface icons so that they are the right size and very quick to type in text for. Are there any questions so far on any of the things I've demoed? I'm going to assume, see, that's somebody mentioned earlier liking to meet in person for these meetings. I agree with that because I'm sure you guys like these things, and I would be able to judge by the smiles on your faces how happy you are to see them, but I can't because I'm in my office in Austin and y'all are all in Minneapolis. So anyway, did somebody have a question?
How about the library icon mixing with the automatic text? Do those play together?
Yes, excellent question. Let's do a demo of that right now. So we will set that. We will click OK. We will make a new VI, and we will say test icon text again and press Control K. And you can see that it figures out that you've got a banner on the VI icon. So it only uses 3 lines of text. If I had typed a whole bunch of stuff, it would have only used 3 lines of text. So it would play nicely with that banner area. Good question. Anything else? All right, I'm going to move on.
Is that specific to libraries or any VI that has a banner?
Any VI that has a banner. Well, now I'd have to go look at the code, but I think it actually looks for specifically looks for the layer in the icon that is called NI library. I would argue that if your VIs all have banners, that means they should probably be in a library in the first place. So, all right, let's move on. Okay, how many of you guys know about switcheroo? Most people know about it at this point. If you hold down the control key and move your auto tool or wiring tool over an input of a function that has 2 inputs, you can swap those inputs. Hopefully you guys knew about that. Well, one of the enhancements we made in 2020, and this one comes from the Idea Exchange, and this one was implemented by Jeff K, is you can do a switcheroo on a function that only has 1 input wired. I know I have wanted this many, many times, so I'm very excited. In fact, there have been times where I wired a dummy input to a function just so I could do a switcheroo. It may seem like overkill, but it felt like the fastest thing at the time. So I'm very excited that we can now do switcheroo if there's only 1 input wired. Okay, this is yet another feature that Jeff K implemented. He's kind of still the wiring guy after all these years. In LabVIEW 2020, if you create a bad wire branch, it only breaks the broken part of the wire. In LabVIEW 2019 and previous, this whole wire would have been broken by doing that operation. So you can see here that the good branches are kept good, the bad branches are bad. And if I press the Control B key to remove bad wires, it only removes the bad wire branches. It's another one from the Idea Exchange that had a lot of votes. Okay, rearrange cases. This is one that I implemented as a right-click plugin. So here, let's go over to 2019 real quick, and I'll make a case structure real quick, and I'll add some cases. And if I do rearrange cases, this is the dialog that you get in LabVIEW 2019 and earlier. It is not resizable, so if you have a big long list, it's hard to see them all. And you can sort the items in the list, and you can move things around in the list, and that is all you can do. So in 2020, we made a lot of enhancements to that by implementing it as a right-click plugin, like I talked about before. So what you're about to see is entirely based in LabVIEW code. You could have written this feature if you really wanted to. If I right-click and do rearrange cases, this is the new interface in LabVIEW 2020. It's resizable, which is great. One of the features that people asked for was the ability to delete multiple cases in a case structure. Right now, if you want to delete cases, you have to do it one at a time. Right-click, delete case, right-click, delete case. Now you can select multiple cases and click delete cases from this dialog, and it will delete them. You can also sort items in the list, just the selection if you want to, or you can sort the whole thing if you want to. And everything I just did is also undoable as well. So rearrange cases got a facelift in LabVIEW 2020 and is a lot more usable. All right, so this one's kind of fun. Let me go over to 2019. So in LabVIEW 2019, look at this enum. This enum has a huge list in it. This is a list of a bunch of NI hardware. I need to find something in that list to pick. Now, I could go through and scroll through here and try to find it. Well, why don't I right-click? I can see this select item tool, right? But look, it's completely worthless. It shows me exactly what I saw when I clicked on the drop-down. Similarly, I have a case structure here with a huge list. Look, this one doesn't even have a scroll bar. Now, I could use the page up and page down buttons, but still, it's going to take me a long time to find something in here. Once again, let me right-click and do showcase. Once again, I have a worthless menu that's exactly the same as the drop-down. In LabVIEW 2020, those menu items are no longer worthless. So in 2020, if I right-click and do select item, now I get a UI that looks a lot like QuickDrop, and now I can type in something. Oh, look, there's the 5411s. I didn't have to scroll around and look for them and change the value. Similarly, on the case structure, right-click, show case. Oh, let's see, 5911. Oh, yeah, I need that one. And pick that, and it goes to that visible case on the case structure. much faster to browse large enums, large case structures with those new right-click menu items.
Hey, Darren, going back one, you created a case and you populated it with quite a few items with just keyboard shortcuts. How did you do that so quickly?
Okay, yeah, I did that quickly, and I wondered if anybody was going to notice that. So when I made this one, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So this kind of falls into what has been hopefully a theme that's emerging in this presentation, which is I like to do things as fast as I can in the LabVIEW editor. There's nothing worse than thinking faster than your editor. And when you have to start right-clicking and doing add case, when that's going to take extra time. So what you can do is, if you have a case on a case structure and you want to create a new case right after it, press Shift Enter and type in the name of the case. That does exactly the same thing as add case after. What's more is, if you have a case that you want to duplicate, then instead of pressing Shift Enter, press Control Shift Enter, and it will duplicate the case. And that's exactly the same thing as right-clicking and doing duplicate case. The Shift Enter trick also works on enums and rings. So instead of having to, I hate the right-click menus on enums and rings, just because it's so tedious to do add item. So instead, when you're typing A, Shift Enter, B, Shift Enter, C, Shift Enter, D, and that's a way to add multiple items to an enum as a single operation. And that works on the front panel as well. So by the way, I have a presentation, another presentation where I talk about all these cool editor enhancements to sort of accelerate your development. I'd be happy to give that presentation to you guys at some point in the future. But that is not the focus of today. Today is LabVIEW 2020 features. Any other questions before I move on this? All right, I'm going to continue.
Switcheroo. When I was at the CLA Summit last September, I requested that if you hold down the Shift key when you're doing a switcheroo on the scalable, say arithmetic node, if you drop a scalable and invert one of the inputs.
You wanted the invert to switch, right?
Yes. When you hold down the Shift key, I want the invert to follow the wire. I think that's much more common.
Yeah, I don't think we got around to that. Sorry.
Okay.
I think
you asked me about that, didn't you? But okay. All right.
Didn't you ask me about that?
Yeah, I think you were one of the people in the conversation, actually. So.
And I think Jeff K walked by while we were having that conversation, and so I kind of passed it off to him, but I guess he never got around.
Yeah, and then he said he would do it. So okay, all right.
All right. I am going to move on. So it bothers me when I'm doing event programming and I've got this little data node hanging out over here that I'm not using. In LabVIEW 2020, you can hide that. If you don't have it wired, you can right-click Visible Items, Event Data Node for this case. If you uncheck that, it gets hidden. If you are programming with filter events, you guys probably know what filter events are, the ones with the question marks on them. You cannot hide these event data nodes. We decided to make them always visible when it's a filter event, the kind with the question mark. But if it's any other event and you don't have it wired, you can hide that event data node. Speaking of hiding things, you can also hide the iteration terminal on a loop now. If you right click and do, you'll notice iteration terminal is checked. If you uncheck it, it goes away. For a for loop that's this big, that's no big deal. It's when my for loops are that big that iteration terminal really gets in my way. So it's nice to be able to hide it if I'm not using it.
Darren, can you also hide the loop count?
You cannot hide the loop count. We decided that if you could hide that, it would be more difficult to discern that what you're working with is a for loop. Not impossible, but a little more difficult. We felt that the readability of the diagram would be hindered more than it would be helped by hiding that terminal. But we did consider it. Any other questions? All right, we have some new hash functions. Prior to LabVIEW 2020, the only hash function we shipped with LabVIEW was MD5. Turns out MD5 is not all that secure, so we got rid of that from the file IO palette. And now we have the file checksum and byte array checksum VIs. So if you have a path, if you have a file that you want to get a checksum for, or if you have a string that you want to get a checksum for, by default, SHA-256 is probably one of the most common. But you can see we've got a whole host of other algorithms, hash algorithms that we can use if you so choose. By the way, I'm remembering that somebody asked a question, I think during Daniel's part of the presentation about, Windows and Mac and Linux support and all that kind of stuff. And I think that question was more geared toward the NXG side, but it reminded me that every single thing I'm showing you today is supported in all of the desktop LabVIEWs. So everything I'm showing here is possible in Windows LabVIEW 2020, Mac, and Linux as well. So just thought I'd throw that out there real quick. The reason I thought of that is because the developer who implemented these things did it entirely in LabVIEW for Linux. So it just kind of, made me remember, oh yeah, LabVIEW for Linux, it does all the same things that I'm showing right now. All right, this next one needs a little bit of explanation. So let's say you have a LabVIEW UI where you want the user to pick a month. You can see here, I've got that. Now, you don't want to have a default value there. Like you don't want it to say January when they first launched the UI, because if they're not paying attention, they're just going to click OK without ever having looked and selected a month. So ideally, your ring would have, hey, user, pick a month. And so you can see select month there. Notice when I do the drop down, select month is not actually one of the things that you see in the ring. And if I pick a month, you'll see select a month doesn't ever show up again. So this is a new UI feature in LabVIEW 2020. You can right click on a ring and choose hide last item when running. And what that'll do is, if you look, notice this VI is not running anymore. You'll look and you can see select month is actually the last item in the ring. But when the VI runs, it doesn't show up in the list because I've chosen that option, hide last item when running. You look here, you'll see that we've changed it to show last item when running so that you can re-enable it if you want to. And now, since I selected that, if we run, we'll now see it in the list again. So this is useful for those UIs where you want to force the user to pick something, but you don't want to show that select a thing item in the list. Hopefully that was clear. This is another one that was implemented as a right-click plugin as well. All right, so now I'm going to talk about some improvements to when you want to create a new class. So if I bring up LabVIEW 2019 and I create a new class in the project, this is what you see. Type a name for your class, and that is it. If you want to change the inheritance, if you want to save it on disk, those are all things that you would have to then go into the properties of the class to do. Well, as you know from Daniel's part of the presentation, we added interfaces to LabVIEW 2020. And while we did that, we looked for ways to improve the existing workflows for classes. And this is one of the areas that we improved. So now if I go into LabVIEW 2020 and do the same thing, new class, look at this great UI that I have. Now, in addition to picking the class name, which is all I could do before, I can also specify which class to inherit from. I can specify any parent interfaces if I want to, and I can save the class to disk. And the default path is next to the project in a folder. So making a new class, we're saving you minutes for every class that you create now by letting you specify these things in this new class UI. I've been wanting this for a long time. I was so happy that we were able to add it to LabVIEW 2020. Okay, multi-error support. This is actually something LabVIEW NXG has had, I believe, since 1.0. So LabVIEW 2020 is catching up to LabVIEW NXG in this regard. We now support the ability to send multiple error values on a single error cluster wire. So this is the merge errors function that you guys are all familiar with, but it has a new configuration option in 2020. You can right-click and choose retain all errors. What that means is if both of these wires have an error value on them, then this output error wire contains both errors. And the way that we accomplish that, just technologically speaking, is we are now sort of overloading the source string inside the error cluster to store more error information. If you're curious how we were able to accomplish that, it's still a single error cluster wire, but now we're storing multiple errors worth of information on it. If you ever need to get to those individual error cluster values again, you can use this error cluster to array of errors VI, which will then split out all errors on this error wire, one or more, into this array of error clusters. So this feature could probably be a whole presentation in and of itself. If you want to learn more about these VIs, they are in the dialog and user interface multiple errors subpalette. But anyway, yeah, keep an eye out for merge errors with that bar on it, because that's what tells you that the merge errors is now retaining multiple error wires or multiple error values on that single error wire.
Darren, can you see the multiple errors in that string if you put an indicator on that wire, or what would that look like?
Yes, if you were to probe that error cluster wire, sorry, I didn't make the demo so that it could be executable, but if you run code and the error wire has multiple errors on it, I believe the way we implemented it, and I should know because I sat next to the guy that did it, the first error is the code that you see, and then any subsequent errors are stored as JSON in the source string of the error cluster. So you could then browse that JSON and just see what all the other errors are.
Great.
Okay, so range limits for type. I added this VI to LabVIEW for the following reason. There are many times where I need to know the maximum value of a data type or the minimum value for a data type. And the way I do it is as follows. I click in the I32 constant, I mash my keyboard for a second, and then I get the maximum value for the I32. It's silly, but it works. Sadly, it doesn't work in LabVIEW NXG, but it does work in LabVIEW, and I do it all the time. But I thought that that was kind of hacky and silly that I had to do that. So now we have this new VI, range limits for types. So whatever integer type you wire into this VI, it's going to give you the minimum value for that type and the maximum value for that type. So now it takes up a little less space on the diagram, and it looks cleaner.
Yeah.
So was there a question?
There's a thunderstorm moving in,
So some of you guys may drop off. Okay, got it.
Going up to your room? It's close.
Okay, so I don't know if any of you have used the TDMS file viewer, but we made some great improvements to it in LabVIEW 2020. Just for comparison's sake, let me bring it up in 2019. So here it is looking at some data. And it's probably hard to tell from my demo here, but whenever I click on new things in the list, sometimes there's a noticeable delay between when it appears in the UI. Also, there's no way for me to look at the graph and the tables at the same time. We made some great improvements to the TDMS file viewer in LabVIEW 2020. If you didn't use it before because you thought it was kind of clunky, I suggest you take another look at it, because in 2020, for one thing, it looks a lot nicer. And for another thing, it's much more performant. Things appear instantaneously for a reasonably sized TDMS file. If you throw a 2 GB file at this thing, you're probably going to have other problems besides seeing how long it takes the graph to update. But for reasonably sized TDMS, things update very quickly. You can see the data and the graph at the same time. You can set up cursors in the graph that work really well. I highly suggest using this tool for any of your TDMS file viewing needs. And that's in the palettes, and that's in QuickDrop in the TDMS subpalette. So we added a ton of properties, methods, and events in LabVIEW 2020. That first row there, you can see all have to do with interfaces. So kind of makes sense that we added that stuff. But everything below that is mostly properties, methods, and events that used to be private. So there are special INI tokens you can add to LabVIEW to enable private functionality. No, I am not going to share what those are in this presentation, but rudimentary Googling skills can find you that information. Nevertheless, private properties, methods, and events are not officially supported by NI for a variety of reasons. Well, we gathered a lot of feedback from advanced users who did use these private properties and methods, some inside of NI, some outside of NI, and basically said, which of these do you think are generally useful for the public? And we gathered that feedback. We culled down the list to things that we could reasonably implement, test, document in the LabVIEW 2020 timeframe. So this slide actually doesn't have, or this diagram doesn't have all of them. It has a lot of them. They're all described in the upgrade notes, which again, I've linked here on this page. But we took a lot of effort to basically go through and take a lot of those properties that were private and make them officially supported. So read the upgrade notes to learn more about those. That is all the content that I have for this presentation. Are there any questions or feedback on the stuff that I've talked about?
Yeah, I'm really excited about a lot of these. If you look at the recording, you'll see me commenting on a bunch of them.
I'm scrolling through right now.
Personally, for those who are not using object-oriented programming yet, I think this shows that 2020 is a really good one to start using object-oriented, so that you could take advantage of these new features. So what questions does everybody else have? I think Josh is talking again.
Yeah, Josh, you're talking, but I can't hear you. Still can't hear you.
Still can't hear you. It doesn't show you as muted. I wonder if you're unplugged. So, yeah. But now we might have lost Josh. He's frozen. So
that's a shame. I'm sure he had something extremely important to share with us.
In general, I'm just amazed with how fast that all went. Darren, appreciate you. I appreciate the demonstration.
Sure.
Yeah,
Everything
happens at about twice the speed that I'm used to seeing it. So, go ahead.
I just drank from the fire hose there. I'm just like, gee, that was good. Thank you.
We can't hear you, Josh. I like your Michael Jordan jacket, though. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, Josh, you're not muted, but yeah, your microphone doesn't seem to be working. So.
Does anybody who I can hear have any questions?
I had been emailed one question actually prior to this meeting. Not sure if this is really the right group, but it was a question around support for the Rio products, SB Rio, and so on and so forth, and whether or not there's an idea of essentially pushing the form factor smaller and making them more powerful. Does anybody here know anything about that, or at liberty to say anything?
I am not a hardware guy, so I can't contribute to that conversation.
Yeah, I know we pushed some new details or capabilities in the last release about 3 months ago or so. I'm not sure if they're aware of that, but I can send you that if you want to take a look.
Sure, yeah, if you could post it to the chat here, I'll make sure that he can see this recording. Absolutely.
I'll try to get that.
Thank you.
And I think Rita had to drop off, but she would actually be the one who could answer that question. But we can get back in touch with you.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I can get his name again and make sure that you guys get connected. That'd be awesome.
Okay. Yeah.
Cool. Any other questions for anybody here?
The fix for 2020 comes out because we usually we need to, at Boston Scientific, we need to validate kind of the software that we're using each time. So we usually like to wait till the bug release comes out. And I was just wondering what the timing on that was, or if anybody knew.
You're talking about like the SP1 release? Historically, SP1s come out like I think in somewhere between November and February. Obviously, that's no guarantee that that's when 2020 SP1 is going to come out, but that's I think around the time they usually do.
Okay, thank you.
Is there a roadmap I've previously, especially for NXG, we've seen roadmaps for features that people can expect in the future. Is there somewhere that people can look for that to kind of see what might be coming next?
For NXG, we still have the roadmap public, but not for LabVIEW 20 or LabVIEW. So that's probably just something you'd have to email us and talk about if you're interested in learning what's coming up.
Okay. Cool.
Finally fixed it.
Yay, we can hear you, Josh.
Darren, I just want to say thank you for presenting. I love all the features you went through. Especially love the object-oriented approach, like talking about objects and interfaces. I will look forward to using those in 2020.
That's great, yeah. And those features I showed, like the new class dialog and stuff like that, those are all written entirely with LabVIEW using some of these scripting methods that I have on the screen here right now. So as you guys start getting more into classes and interfaces and you discover maybe some tooling that you might want to have at your organization, if you can probably do it because we had to make the scripting interface really rich to be able to support all those features in LabVIEW itself.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot, guys. Really appreciate it. It was a great couple of presentations here. And thanks to everybody else. It seems like, so we got Matthew, Rita, Nilsson, anybody else from NI here that joined us? I'm not sure how many people typed in here. So, but thank you all so much for coming and helping us out. It's been really great.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
So we've reached the end of the user group meeting. So it's time. Cheers.
You got it.
Yeah, which brewery are we going to? Or Tom, sorry.
This is stuff I brewed myself. So
The LabVIEW brewery.
yeah.
Automated.
But yeah, so thank you, Darren. Thank you, Daniel. Appreciate it. So if you guys have feedback on the virtual user group meeting, if there's better ways to do it or thoughts on it, we will certainly take feedback. I don't know, 3 months from now, we might be able to meet in person. We might not. I don't really know where exactly that will go. So if there are ways to make this better, please let us know. But this as a first go around on this, I appreciate so many of you showing up to be here. And I thought, the one thing I miss obviously is all the dawdling, like we didn't start 15 minutes late. We didn't go over time. So I'm sure everyone else will miss that as well. And we're 30 minutes shorter than normal. So, but other than that, I think everything went according to plan. But if you have feedback on how to make it better, please let us know.
Thank you very much, Darren. Always a pleasure.
Sure thing.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. You all have a good evening.
All right, y'all too.
All right. Thanks again.
Have a good evening.
See you guys later.
Bye.